Konami's Silent Hill revival is in full swing. After a decade-long dormancy, we've seen a recent smattering of series content, highlighted by last year's excellent Silent Hill 2 remake. The upcoming Silent Hill F, though, offers a full-fledged brand new Silent Hill experience, built independent of other series entries. So is Silent Hill F a successful installment in the long-running horror franchise? And how does it fare on PS5 consoles? Silent Hill F is often visually arresting. This series entry is set in mid-20th century Japan, breaking from the contemporary American stylings of prior efforts. Expect a lot of organic materials, especially brownish-gray woods and earth, along with sickly red flowers and green foliage. There are industrial touches here and there, but modern machinery is sparsely strewn, and the game's architecture is primitive. In true Silent Hill fashion, everything is blanketed in a thick haze of volumetric fog, which is omnipresent during most daytime outings. It's a very well-executed look. A lot of the visual credit here goes to Epic, because this is another Unreal Engine 5 title, just like last year's Silent Hill 2 remake. The trifecta of standout UE5 technologies, Lumen, Nanite, and Virtual Shadow Maps, are in use here, and define the game's presentation. F is lit often using soft, diffuse skylight, which is a lighting condition that highlights Lumen's strengths. Light fills these spaces with a kind of soft, ambient luminance that is occluded gently, which is a scenario where rasterized lighting techniques tend to fail. Expect to make out subtle occlusion in the corners of rooms, underneath roots, and around tufts of foliage, with minimal screen space artifacts. This is the software Lumen version of the technique though, which does have a tendency to darken shadowed regions excessively, though typically in a pleasing way. There's some minor image breakup here and there as well, but relative to other games that use software Lumen, I think F fares quite well. Certain Lumen pain points, like small emissive lights, aren't so common here. Silent Hill F also features Lumen reflections. These generally add a good amount of perspective-correct depth to scenes that feature water or other glossy surfaces, though typical software Lumen concessions are visible. Expect to make out blobby silhouettes of trees and buildings here, but skinned meshes are only reflected in screen space, and oddly the surface color is usually not apparent in these Lumen reflections. And because the SSR samples the scene before fog is applied, there's often a considerable mismatch between the appearance of the scene and the reflection detail, even when the shot can rely on SSR. Virtual Shadow Maps tie the visuals together. F makes heavy use of UE5's Shadow Map ray tracing to soften and diffuse shadows as they fall away from the occluding object, which creates beautiful results in this window-lit interior scene. The combination of sharp detail with excellent diffusion attracts the eyes, in situations where cascaded shadow maps would falter. Nanite gives the game's geometry continuous LOD behavior, though it would be pretty hard to make out discrete LOD steps anyways, owing to poor visibility in most areas. The game doesn't necessarily have that pin-sharp film-quality Nanite look that we find in various UE5 tech demos, but art assets are generally sculpted to a reasonable level of quality. Silent Hill F hits visual highs in its fog-soaked daytime sequences, which bring together Epic's rendering tech with inspired artistry. The red and white vines and flowers that erupt as time passes are a particular highlight, leaving veiny shoots between buildings. Under normal conditions, the town is a normal, if gloomy, semi-rural space, but as the story develops and characters' tensions, insecurities, and vices come into focus, corruption seeps in. This kind of visual look is something that Unreal Engine 5 is very good at delivering. But the game's hallucinatory segments, which take place while the protagonist is sleeping, don't quite deliver the same rich visual flavor. These sequences usually take place in relative darkness, and interior decoration is minimal, with lower geometric density compared to the outdoor scenes. Combat sequences, though, are consistently impressive. Silent Hill F has surprisingly good core combat, which is anchored by responsive, satisfying animation. Lock-on targeting allows you to dance around opponents and make superhuman dodges, while landing blows which are emphasized with a good number of hit frames. The enemies themselves are quite inspired as well. Most commonly, you'll find these marionette-like foes, which hold themselves in inhuman positions and attack with superhuman speed. Fine details in their attack routine are carefully considered, down to the jiggling of their joints within their sockets. Other common enemies include these feral humanoid things, these nightmarish human amalgams, and this floral behemoth. Critically, all feel unique and pose distinct challenges for the player. Cutscenes can be quite striking as well. These non-interactive sequences strike the player with a sense of foreboding and feature slow camera movements and deliberate pacing to drive mystery and player anxiety. Action moments and horror turns punctuate the dread every so often, though the game sometimes likes to build anticipation without an immediate payoff. F's graphical strengths make these sequences land, particularly its character rendering, which can look quite handsome. Lower fidelity and less cinematically sound movies could have produced comic results, which is a fine line to tread when trying to portray plausible rendered scenes. On PlayStation 5, Silent Hill F offers a performance mode and a quality mode. Underlying visual settings seem similar between the two mode variants, outside of some minor changes to Lumen GI. Quality mode has a subtly different appearance if we flash back and forth, but there are no categorical changes, I would say. This doesn't quite track with titles like Mafia: The Old Country or Clair Obscur Expedition 33, where close-range traces appeared absent in their performance modes. Lumen reflections only have subtle differences as well. Here, I think the clarity of the reflection is determined by the quality of the SDF representation and the roughness of the reflective material, and less by the resolution of any ray tracing. It's possible that other common UE5 tweaks, like a lowered roughness cutoff, might be in the mix here, but if so, it's not obvious. Volumetric effects are lower quality in the performance mode, which is obvious in the low-resolution artifacts that pop up when the fog intersects with the floor here. Other effects that typically scale with resolution seem to differ as well, like VSM quality, though spotting differences is surprisingly challenging. I did spot one difference in VSM coverage in this shot, however. Image quality is really the primary differentiator here. Performance mode is soft but stable, with a 1080p-like resolve, judging from comparisons to the PC code. Internal resolutions here fall around 1080p as well. I think TSR is the image treatment of choice based on certain artifact patterns in the final image. F looks quite soft in performance mode, but it's a low-contrast haze-ridden game, so I think this image treatment fares fine. Quality mode is sharper, resolves more detail, and has fewer artifacts. We're looking at a 1440p internal resolution typically, with a 1440p-like final image that probably uses TSR. Again, judging from comparisons with PC. For console UE5 software, we'd usually expect games to go up a step, perhaps targeting 1440p in performance mode and 4K in quality mode, and I would be curious to see what Silent Hill would look like with more aggressive upscaling behavior. In performance mode, you should expect a mostly locked 60fps update. Silent Hill F was probably built with a close eye on PS5 frame rates throughout development, because it essentially never runs into GPU-limited constraints. Unfortunately, F does suffer from traversal stutters, which typically pop up in more open areas. These are sometimes coupled with delta time wobbles, which cause the game to decelerate and accelerate oddly when drops occur. But these problems aren't a major issue in most areas. Expect to see fairly regular drops when roaming around the town in later chapters, but enclosed areas are typically fine, and earlier game content is generally satisfactory. In cinematic sequences, however, the game falls to 30 FPS. Quality mode predictably rises above these issues for the most part by targeting a lower refresh. F has no problem reaching 30 FPS the vast majority of the time, with the exception of a few hitches that still breach 33 millisecond frame times. The game's initial running animation does have an issue in quality mode though, where the player appears to sharply decelerate briefly before returning to full speed. This is a distracting issue and it makes the quality mode a bit less enjoyable to play. Unfortunately, PS5 Pro does not fare particularly well with Silent Hill F. The developers have elected to take a familiar approach here, consolidating their mode offerings into a single, enhanced mode with PSSR, targeting 60 FPS. PSSR unfortunately does not work well at all with this title, producing an artifact-ridden image. Expect to see a constant peppering of coarse noise, with pulsing, strobing artifacts in areas with occluders like grass or debris. PSSR doesn't seem to like ray tracing effects, which require amortization and cleanup over many frames. And here I think we're finding some unfortunate interactions with Lumen GI here. I don't have a firm confirmation that the game is using PSSR and PS5 Pro, but these blemishes strongly suggest the technique. Internal resolutions come in a bit above 1080p here typically. Finding good pixel counts is tough in Silent Hill F because motion blur cannot be turned off on either PS5 system, so it's only possible to get a rough read on the game's internal counts in select shots. It's hard to guess at the output res, but PS5 Pro looks closer to the PS5 quality mode if I pull out still frames. The settings here otherwise seem similar to the PS5 modes. And when these modes have meaningfully different settings, it seems to shade closer to the PS5 performance mode. I don't have any problem if developers want to simplify their mode offerings for PS5 Pro users, and I don't have an issue necessarily with using PSSR. But if developers are going to make large changes for PS5 Pro users, they should ensure those changes produce an improvement over PS5. I'd rather have no Pro enhancement here, or ideally have a version of the game with boosted resolution figures while retaining TSR. Frame rates on PS5 Pro prove similar to the base PS5 performance mode. Expect a locked 60 FPS update absent momentary hitches that stem from traversal hiccups. As a general rule, expect that interiors will mostly be fine and that wobbles will be more noticeable when running through the town area in later chapters. I think Silent Hill F is a more successful title on consoles than last year's Silent Hill 2 remake. Performance is a major factor, as F runs at a consistent 60 FPS clip outside of its traversal stutters. Hitting 60 FPS on PS5 was probably a top priority throughout development for Silent Hill F, which is less evident in 2, as it falls below 60 FPS for extended stretches in its performance mode. F's setting provides more natural environments where UE5 is best positioned to deliver pleasing visual results, and the world packs believable density. I really enjoy the art in F, with its pangs of color and archaic feel. 2 is more often set in artificial, reflection-rich streets and interiors, which tend to expose Lumen issues and is a sepia-toned and less distinctive affair on the whole. Other bits of awkwardness in 2, like gawky-looking characters and cutscenes or slightly stiff player animation, are non-issues in F, with its beautiful cutscenes and top-tier brawling. It was hard to find anything that felt less than polished. I think both of these games are good-looking UE5 efforts, and both draw from series staple visual themes, but F usually distinguishes itself as a particularly good UE5 title on PS5 systems. But both titles do run into some of the same traps. Traversal stutters coupled with delta time wobbles are a substantial issue in both games, a common artifact of Unreal Engine development. And both have had poor initial PS5 Pro implementations, running into the same pitfalls with PSSR. Sony's upscaler needs to be used with care, and in this case, it probably should have been discarded in favor of an analytical solution. I'm hoping that the developers will drop PSSR here, as Bloober Team did last year, at least in their remix performance mode. I'd love to be able to comment on the Xbox releases, but we weren't supplied code pre-release, so we may have to return to them in the future. But Alex will have a video out soon exploring the PC code in depth. So I'm relatively happy with the state of Silent Hill F on PS5 systems, assuming the game's pro problems can be addressed promptly. This is a good UE5 effort, though not a flawless one. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and press the bell for YouTube notifications. Check out the Patreon at patreon.com/digitalfoundry for exclusive and early access content, and to get in touch, use social media.